I'm here with calling, are you ready to go? Okay, I'm calling to order this meeting tonight, advisory. It is December the 5th, and we're gonna go straight into the budget. Before we get to the budget, I just wanna make sure for the record that the budgets we are looking at have not been agreed to or finalized with the Board of Selectmen. We're trying our best to look at the budgets that we can to get at least a picture of where we started and where this is going probably, based on the discussions as they progress with the Board of Selectmen as last night. So that is for the record that we are working through this. We will not vote on it, but we will have a base to work from later in the process. And as you may know, at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, the town manager or town administrator at the finance team planned to be only going back to the Board of Selectmen with a reworked version in January. Maybe earlier if it's possible, that Mr. Kulenda said, but that is the timetable for the record for the meeting for tonight. And so, very welcome. Why don't you take the chair? Sure. And take us through, I think everybody knows you. If not so, introduce yourself again.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah Castle. I'm the Director of Southborough Youth and Family Services. And thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this evening. Can you hear me? Is that better? Okay, thank you. So I've submitted, or I've shared with you this evening a few documents, some of which you have already, a couple of graphics which you may not have seen. So the first pages are submitted budget request for FY 2020, and what we were looking for was to increase our assistant director's position up to full-time year-round. Currently, that position is 40 hours a week for 44 weeks out of the year. For 8 weeks, it goes down to 30 hours a week. The reason for that is we used to have a program probably over 10 years ago now, a summer camp program that we would hire staff for to run the summer camp program as the assistant director at that time did not feel it was within her job responsibility to be a camp counselor. And so they put the hours down to 30 a week and hired somebody to run the summer camp program. As I mentioned, we haven't had that program in at least 10 years, and so this is something that's just rolled over from one year to the next. We would really like to see that position to be full-time year-round because of the level of need that we're responding to. Historically, the summers have been slower for us, but in more recent years, there's been an uptick in the number of people we're working with. We also would like to see our program coordinator position go to full-time. Currently, this position is 19 hours a week for 44 weeks out of the year. The employee in this position does not come in at all during the summer months because the majority of our need for her hours is during the school year, though we really struggle in the summer months as a result. So we were looking to have her position up to full-time. And then the last other expense is to have $500 go towards employee training for the program coordinator position. The second handout there is a breakdown of the salaries, which I kind of outlined already. And the third handout in there is a memo outlining the line items and what those things cover for our budget. I'd like to really call attention to the 5-year plan that we've submitted along with this request. And I like to reference that because I think having the big picture of where we're hoping to expand our services to really helps in understanding the need for our program coordinator position to be full-time. I've also provided some data for you there. The most recent complete set of data we have is from FY 2017. We're still collecting our data for FY 2018, but the number of folks that we're seeing in our office for support services, for need-based services, and for our prevention programs is something that's been very difficult for us to keep up with. In particular, our program coordinator's position has really resembled what's outlined here as the community resource specialist. We have a very involved holiday giving program, camp scholarship program, a birthday program. All of those are very nice and they're very time intensive. But in more recent years, we have seen an uptick in people looking for things like emergency housing, people who are in need of emergency funds, from things like medical expenses to utilities, people receiving shut-off notices for utilities. We have an increase in people receiving fuel assistance through our department. And there's a number of things that we would like to provide for folks that come to us for these resources that we can't currently at the number of hours that she's working. Things like helping them with housing issues. I don't think many people are aware in Southborough, but in the last couple of years, we've had 3 homeless families come through our office. People who have either lived in Southborough and have lost their homes for one reason or another, or who are passing through Southborough looking for help. And we have scrambled to try to support them and find resources for them that are, going to help them long term. Our emergency funds only can really put a dent in that, and we don't have the bandwidth to be able to do the level of outreach that's needed to support folks like these. Furthermore, we would like to be able to help people apply for SNAP benefits, for other public assistance programs, help them get connected with Mass Health, so on and so forth. And we'd really like to see this position spending a lot of time looking for federal, state, and local programs in the area that can provide some of these services. We're not looking to provide all of these ourselves, but we don't even have the ability to do the outreach to find out what's available nearby. We'd like to know who's eligible, what the requirements are, what the paperwork is. I mean, it's a very daunting process for some of these public assistance programs. And when you're in a crisis, it's very difficult to navigate that process, and we'd like to be able to hold people's hands as they're going through that. So really what we're talking about is some of the most vulnerable of our residents here in Southborough who are looking for help, and we'd really like to beef up some of those resources for them. There's more recently been a lot of need for that. I think that's all I want to say about FY 2020 for right now. Of course, there's other things outlined here in the 5-year plan. One of the other things that's in your packet that I just want to call attention to, that we have put together a graph that outlines the last 20 years, our budget. And the blue line is our actual budget. The red line is if you adjust for inflation. And what you can see here is that we have lost purchasing power over the last 20 years if we adjust for inflation. we need to add to that increased pressures on youth, increased pressures on families. And other data that we don't have here that I just recently was suggested to me that we add to this is the population in Southborough over the course of the last 20 years has increased. And so if we look at the year 2000 through 2019, it looks like it's roughly a 15% increase, and thus it would make sense that we're having a harder time responding to needs. As it stands right now, our metrics are reflecting that with just our really more substantial programs and services we're providing, that we are reaching about just under 10% of the community. If we were to take our numbers and add some of these larger events that we put on, such as the summer concert series that we co-sponsor with the Recreation Department, or a speaker that we bring into town, we are really reaching about just under 20% of the community. So the data is there that supports that we are seeing a lot of folks, and that there's a high level of need. That's all I have to say.
I will open up for questions.
Sure.
And we can go down the line, or whoever's got a first question can go. So why don't we go down the line, seeing we've got two hands already.
Sarah,
You, John.
thank you for the presentation and the packet. I can tell you, since being involved in town government since 2010, this is one of the better packages I've seen, one of the better presentations I've seen, one of the better advocacies I've seen. This is a tough fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking to add you're looking to have a department with 3 full-time people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to the question that, well, Southborough is such an affluent community, why do we need 3 full-time youth and family services employee, part A, and part B,
Mm-hmm.
you put your hours down as 40. I know you don't work 40. Tell us a little bit about your work week as well. So can you go A and then B?
Sure. So, A, yes, Southborough is an affluent community. However, I will cite numbers from our holiday giving program. For example, we have 31 families participating in that program this year. It is income-based, and so there are certainly folks in town who are not experiencing the same, who do not fit that mold. That aside, all of us are impacted by mental health on some level, and so we have folks accessing our services who have plenty of means, who have great health insurance. However, they're coming up against long wait lists all over the place, or people who are not taking their insurance. And really, to reference that 5-year plan again, our hope would be that we could increase our capacity to a place where we could spend more of our time being a safety net for people, a holding spot for them, provide stabilization and support short term, so that and then have the knowledge to be able to successfully send them on their way to some more long-term supports. But socioeconomic status aside, we have all walks of life coming through our office.
So it's not income dependent as to who you see.
Right.
Okay. What about the second part of the question?
How many hours I work? I'm not really sure. I know that a lot of my job is incidental in nature, so I'm in the office or I'm in town at least 40 hours a week, but I'm taking a lot of phone calls and responding to emails and meeting with people at various times, and my schedule is not very consistent. So,
One final question, if I may. Do you know or can you give this committee any information as to comparable towns in terms of their departments, how they're staffed, and
Sure.
how we compare to those comparable towns?
Sure. I do have relationships with other youth and family service departments in other communities. The challenge with that is that some towns have services like ours in their health department, or and they might have a standalone position like a social worker who's, oddly enough, sometimes falls under a recreation department purview. So there is definitely comparables. I have relationships with youth directors in other communities, and I'd be happy to provide some of that information for you guys.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you.
Next.
So before I ask the question, I need to explain, I think one thing that will help as far as discussion goes. So I've been involved with this group through the Friends program for about 20 years, helped them form the 501c3 that supports them. I've been on this committee for a long time and have sat here year after year and watched this tiny budget get cut like every other budget. We had years where we literally cut budgets, and so they got cut like everybody else. This budget is so small, it's not like DPW or fire or police. It has no fat in it whatsoever. So when they got cut, they really got hurt. We used to have a summer program, which we don't have anymore. So they figured out a way to help kids that can't afford to go to camp get to camp, but we used to actually run a camp for those kids in the summer, and we don't do that anymore because that got cut, 10 years ago or so. I don't know who was on this committee when this happened. It happened, 3 years ago. John Butler was still on it. We told this group when they came to us, Sarah's predecessor, Lori, was still in place. We said, we realized that you'd been cut too much, that you just couldn't afford this little chop, 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 and still do what you needed to do. So we asked you to come to us and tell us what you really needed to do the job that you think needed to be done in this town. And so I think this is what you're really finally doing, and this is what you're saying. This is what we really need under the circumstances with all the people that today need services. 20 years ago, I thought the same thing you just said. I thought, Stan, what do you mean? Southborough's fine, right? And I learned because I signed so many checks for all these people that needed things. So I learned the hard way. There were people in this committee at that time that would say, we don't need this group at all. I don't even know why we have this whole department. We just get rid of the whole department. So there was a group that thought that. So I've seen what they do. They've been cut unfairly over the years, and even though I'm the biggest fiscal hawk there is, and know that we've got a budget problem that's going to last for a long time. So this isn't going to be solved with what they're doing. But I just think this is such an anomaly as far as what we need to do, that we really need to consider what they want, even though it's going to be way outside what is going to happen to other departments. This is just a unique department as far as what they need. They've taken too many cuts over the years. That's why the diagram she just showed us is relevant. But I want everybody to understand that it's basically 1.5 persons. This is all people, and they can't necessarily be looked at like other departments. I really think they should be looked at separately, and we asked them to come forward and do what she's done tonight 2 years ago, so they're doing that. So I think we really need to take a long, hard look when it's time to vote on this, as far as this one being possibly different than the other ones we're going to have to probably be tougher on.
Thank you. Next.
Okay.
So my only question is around just order of magnitude, how much is being contributed to the summer concert series? And it's not that that's a valid or not a valid opportunity to support. I'm just curious.
So I'm not sure I understand your question.
So I see under contracted services, summer concert series being identified as one of the opportunities that the group is supporting.
Oh, sure.
Can you give me a sense just as to how much that would be out of the overall budget?
Sure. So we actually, in conjunction with the Recreation Department, apply for a grant through the Southborough Cultural Arts Council every year, and we've been very grateful that they've actually awarded us some funding for the concert series. Being that we co-sponsor this with the Recreation Department, usually we pay for one band for the concert series. We also find sponsorships for the concert series, so in general, the contribution from our department is usually around $400 to $500 for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank
Hi.
you for that. I just have a question about the community resource specialist.
Yes.
So the items in red, one, can you explain what SNAP benefits are?
Sure. It's formally referred to as food stamps.
Oh, okay.
That's the new name of the program.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And for the items in red, can you explain kind of what are you looking for education on where to go, and like coming out with like some sort of pamphlet that if a family comes to you and needs certain things, you can hand them the information over? Or are you actually looking to like walk through the Mass Health application with them?
Yes, more, because that's what you're first referencing is kind of what we do right now.
Okay, so-
Somebody comes to us and says, there's a gentleman who's living out of his car, who comes from Marlborough, stays in Marlborough sometimes, stays in Southborough sometimes, came to us looking for assistance with housing. And we Googled, I feel ashamed to say that, but we started feverishly looking into what we could do for him. We had emergency funds available, but for a gentleman who's living out of his car, it really, beyond offering him gas money, it was not sufficient. And so he's a really perfect example of exactly why we feel we need these extra hours.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
I've spent some time talking to Sarah and to people from the board, and Kathy said a lot of what I was going to say. But what I wanted to stress is that there's a new vision going for this organization now, which is way beyond, I think, what happened years ago. It's gone beyond therapy to a much broader notion of what the obligation is to our citizens who are essentially hidden. They can't come to us with statistics because it's private. So what they do is we take their word for it, but we can see the results when people are served. And they're broadening services tremendously from what used to go on, going into the schools, the housing support that you're doing, and all the other kinds of things that you offer. What isn't well known is what Sarah has suggested, that there are real opioid problems in this town, there are suicide problems in this town that people don't know about. And this is a way to directly impact that problem and to support families who are dealing with those kinds of concerns. So I'm all in favor of supporting this very small budget, as Kathy said. Thank you.
Thank you.
With the change in hours, so you've got these hours that are, sometimes in the year they're light, sometimes they're heavier.
Mm-hmm.
Does that cause any issues for retention? Or do the people like the hours like that?
Yeah, we're fortunate in that we have a really cohesive team, and everybody has been able to make their hours work for their schedules. And in fact, I think that works in our favor, and it hasn't been an issue. And in fact, our current program coordinator is very interested in what we're proposing. I don't know if that answers your question.
So the hours, if you up the hours,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to drive people away. It's not going to drive your staff away.
No,
Okay.
no.
Because I didn't know if they had, kind of liked the
Gotcha.
semi-part-time.
Sure.
people.
I think as much as we'd all like that, realistically, it works well for them. So, and they're on board.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I echo what the other members have said. Specifically, I'm curious about the training you're asking for. The $500 is frankly a small amount, but I'm just curious.
Sure.
how would you leverage the training that you get? And is it the same training for all 3 people? Or?
Sure. So currently in our employee training line item, we have $500 allocated for my position, $500 allocated for our assistant director position, and I'd like to add $500 for the program coordinator position. For myself and the assistant director, we use that to attend workshops and for some of the counseling work that we're doing, but also I refer to it in my head as sort of benefits boot camp. There was a period of time that I was attending trainings to learn more about some of these public assistance programs, long before we, sort of had this avenue that we were headed down. So I envision that $500 for the program coordinator to help get that person up to speed on what some of these public assistance programs look like, what the eligibility requirements are. There's a lot of training opportunities out there for such things. Yep.
Sarah, last year you came to us and you had a large group of people with you and discussed the program on a wider basis regarding drug abuse.
Yes.
And the results of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just as for information, although this is not pertinent to this, but has anything happened to that program just for us?
Sure. Yeah. So last year we were trying to get the program coordinator's position up to 19 hours per week to help coordinate the Northborough Southborough Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. It's a mouthful, I know. And with that position up to 19 hours a week, we have found that we still have to share the responsibility of coordinating it. But the good news, I think, is that, so historically, this group has not existed for very long, and there was somebody that was in a grant-funded position through the state, the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services, who was coordinating that program, and they lost that position, and so this coalition that we had started kind of fell apart, and so our department wanted to step forward and help keep it afloat as we feel, as Judy was mentioning about now is not a good time to stop addressing substance abuse issues. And so we stepped forward to say we would like to continue the coordination of that program, of that group, which consists of members of different sectors of both communities from both Northborough and Southborough. And we have successfully continued our meetings. We're bringing a presenter, Dr. Ruth Pote, to Algonquin at the end of January. We've been putting on hidden in plain sight exhibits at the middle schools in both communities. There's a number of activities that we've been engaged in. So I would say that it was successful because we were able to continue the coordination of that program and not just see it disappear.
Can you just say again, sorry, how many towns are involved?
Just 2. Originally, when the state was asking us whether we wanted to do a coalition in Southborough and one in Northborough, the decision was made to do a joint coalition because a lot of our target population is at the high school, and it made sense for us to work together. So we do have similar, we work together on similar events. There are times that we'll have one event in Northborough and one event in Southborough, but the mission is the same, if that makes sense.
So do you do all the coordination, or is there a team between you and Northborough? Is there a team that do the trying to understand?
Right now, it consists of essentially our office is doing the coordination. Unfortunately, our counterpart in Northborough is has much fewer resources than we do. And so they have just recently lost an employee to retirement. And so they have stepped forward to help us coordinate that program when we're unable to attend one of the meetings. But the program coordinator and I sort of tag team that coalition.
Any more questions? Yes, in that case, make sure you introduce yourself, go sit next to Sarah and put on the microphone, and
I think it happens automatically somehow.
it depends how long you want to be.
No, I'll be really short. My name is Susan Butka, and I've been on the board
Sure.
now for about 5 or 6 years. I have seen such a dramatic increase in the amount of clients coming to the office. I feel like, we've talked about this before, that they are drowning. People don't think that we have issues here, that because we are an affluent community, that we don't have these mental health issues. The anxiety, the life expectancy has gone down. I don't know if you have seen those articles, due to opioid abuse and overdose and suicide. I think we really need this. And I hate getting up in front of people and talking, but I'm passionate about this. They don't have enough help there. They're the safety net. It's what our residents deserve. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
I think it's very important that you speak. I mean, the platform here tonight is important. Spoke to Sarah about it, and that is that it's videotaped. The community, the Board of Selectmen, everybody can see the presentation.
Great.
And so I think from that point of view,
Thank you.
so from that point of view, this is good. We will, as advisory, we review the budget that's presented to us by the Finance Committee and from the Board of Selectmen. We'll take our own view on it, and we will do it when we see what comes forth from the Board of Selectmen. And thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, I have to inform everybody that after posting the meeting and quite a bit after it, Recreation, I was contacted by Christine, and I was contacted to say, well, they're not ready to do it. They still are working with the Board of Selectmen, and postponed it. I put it on the agenda. I will put it on the agenda for next week. So we don't have them here. So that is off the agenda tonight. The next one is library, but library is not here yet. So why don't we carry on to the next item on the agenda, and when library comes in, we'll slot them in. So we're not going to waste time. So Mark emailed me today that he would not be able to do it. He has a family obligation, and he said Brian is more capable than he is to do it. And Brian, why don't you join us? And
I think so. I also that's really necessary. But
I have Siri talking to me. Brian, please. I do want to say I don't think it's necessary to repeat what you did last night. People can look at what happened at the Board of Selectmen meeting. But for all of us, and everybody was not here at the last meeting, I think it's very important for us to look at the challenges that we are facing at advisory to work through this, because if I understood it correct, and I just want you to look at, firstly, the time frame, when you think we can have viable material back. And secondly, when and where you think you guys are heading right now for us, and what we can still review that is tangible, and when we really can start to look at material that is for real, that we can work on.
Sure. So, and I may tread through some material you already know, but as you know, the board instructed Mark and myself to go through and do an exercise of some different tax rate scenarios, which we did 3, a 7, a 6, and a 5. Last night, they sort of came out with a final directive to I think it was between 6 and 7. I took it as 6.5% is where they sort of want to target a tax rate, another scenario. So those 3 scenarios we did, I kind of said they were templates, they were drafts, they were illustrative purposes to show sort of what we could do to get down to those rates. They weren't definite. They weren't probably going to all be fixed is where they were going to end up. So now we're working on the 6.5%. So we kind of have to go through this process again. We obviously want to have to get in, it's a little bit of a quick schedule we're under because the holiday obviously is in 3 weeks, and we have to get back to the departments. And we've never sat down a second time with the departments. We obviously distributed our material to them, but we never sat down and had a dialogue with them. So we need to, me and Mark have to go through the budgets again, get to a plan that we have, sit down with departments affected again in the next 2 weeks, have a dialogue with them, make any changes for that, and then get some material presented for the board for probably their January meeting. I'm assuming it'll be either their first January meeting or this, maybe even the second. Not quite sure where they stand on that. You may have heard they want to have a separate meeting for that out of last night. They don't want it on an agenda with anything else, so it'll be its own meeting in January. You'll all be aware when we identify the date. I expect the department heads will all show up to that one. It's going to be a busy one. It'll be much more filled than it is tonight, so that ought to be interesting. But the challenges are still there for a 6.5% rate. It is going to mean some cuts, so that means about, what's that, about $1.2 million, $1.3 million, somewhere around there. And there, as I was telling the board yesterday, there's still unknowns. I actually redid the capital today. I wasn't going to do it at the last second before last night's meeting because it would be like doing it tonight for you guys, redoing the budgets, yesterday for your meeting today. It just would have confused you. So, but there's been like 4 or 5 updates in the last week for the capital. Facilities just gave me an update for their library expectations.
How much?
That was a little different. I'm sorry?
How much?
How much? It ended up being a net of about, well, they've moved some stuff around. John has moved some things, deferred some stuff till 2021, and the mitigation for the water was a little higher. So it ended up being, I think, between 100 and 200,000 higher net as far as, what the capital plan had for him. So that goes against us, actually. But we knew that was coming. And there's still more numbers coming on that project, so.
Brian, can you be specific about the 5 items?
Which 5 items? I'm
You
sorry?
said there are about 5 items that came into the capital budget new, that you updated.
No,
or that you updated.
Well, he deferred a couple items. There was the mitigation that changed. There were some other items that have changed in other areas, such as there's been a couple of departments that have issued new budgets. There's small amounts, the clerk department, the other operational department. I've had to redo the debt budget because and this relates to recreation, the NERI design for the turf is now apparently the choate design for the turf, and it was a different amount. It initially was $200,000, now it's $120,000. So that was a recent conversation. So every time everything like that changes, I have to go and change 8 other things. So anyways, but that was another thing that changed. And there are other funds. There's the school department, who we've been in touch with Superintendent Johnson the last week. I don't know who saw the meeting last night, but we did touch on it that we expected this great year with the regional budget, and we
You
were
expect
hoping
what?
the regional budget. We were hoping to have a great year because the enrollment went down, and found out that the enrollment wasn't quite as linked to the whole formula that we thought. So we actually may end up going up in the assessment from what we have now. So,
Stop, Brian.
Yep.
The figures we actually had at the meeting here was in the order of a split of an 8% increase on Algonquin 8% of the increase going to Northborough and about 2.7 to Southborough.
Mhm.
Is those were the order of the figures, has that changed? Is it what you say, is that's changing?
It's probably changing, yes, yes. I don't
Higher-
know what the order is, but
Higher for Southborough.
correct, correct. I think a number of years ago, we went into this issue called the wealth factor from the state, and because Southborough is deemed wealthy, which we were just talking about, it goes against it's part of the formula and the minimum contributions and all that. I don't know the figures on that yet. I'm hoping that she initially thought the figure was upwards of $500,000, which gave me like a dizzy fit. But then she's been reworking the numbers, and it looks like it may be a little less than that, maybe like 100 or 200,000. Still another thing against us, though. So we've got these things out there, hanging out there, that could go either way, such as the benefits and some other items that we don't know yet. And that's sort of the unknowns we're working with. But as far as the departmental budgets go in the capital, I think the capital, now that John's sort of shifted his around, between the next 2 weeks with Mark and myself, meeting with especially Karen, who has a lot of capital, we can come forward with some definitive plan in the next 2 weeks and get it out to the board and the committee to take a look at, and have some time before to see specifically what we think. And then, it's like it always is. It's going to be up to the Board of Selectmen to give their opinion. It's going to be up to this board to give their opinion, and hopefully we can come together. And we can either will
I
or
will
won't.
open up to the committee just now.
Mhm.
The figures that were bantered around, I spoke to John, and we spoke about it for the water mitigation at the library was in the order of $500,000.
Yes.
And if we have another storm, we're gonna have the same problem. So you say now it's not $500,000 anymore, and it's,
Well, it was not 500, but it was somewhere close to that, yeah.
but what, you say now it's 150?
No. It was his total amount is close to
Still.
500,000, yeah. It's a little under it, but
That was not in the budget presented last night.
no. So, again, that's unfortunately, we knew that whole library item is sort of, in the process of being worked through. He still has some engineering estimates to do. We don't have a final answer on it yet.
Just as far as the recreation is concerned, one more question from my side. Where in the budget is everything of recreation? Where is everything in the budget? Can you just say what is exempt, what is in capital, can you just, want to make sure we can see it?
Yeah.
Can you just comment on that?
Well, obviously, their recreation consists of the three pieces: their revolving fund, their operating department, which is very small, to be honest,
Yep.
and then their not-so-small piece, which is the capital, which has obviously been discussed quite a bit the last year or two, or three, for the fields. So right now, we had what was passed at town meeting for the design, the Lundblad, the Trotter track, in those smaller items for the recreation. But they do have the new turf proposal that was supposed to be at Neary. That is in my budget. But again, like I said, this was a very recent conversation that I was actually not a part of, but I was told that now it's focused on Chokefield as a proposal for turf, and the design should be $120,000. So that, again, all that's in the debt budget, though, because it's all financed through that. It's all non-exempt debt.
Okay, the
so-
point,
Mhm.
it's what has been voted at town, it is in the debt schedules, that's fine.
Yep.
Trying to see what is new in the capital. Can you
It's
just be
only
specific?
well, for FY20, it's only the chote design, which is, I think, now it's like $60,000 dollars. That would be for next year, for about FY20, if it's approved
For 20,
for 20.
it'll be in this budget,
Yes, it is in this budget now.
yes, and it's in the capital.
Yes, it is in the capital. I had to change the capital plan, yes. So there's a capital plan you don't have that's updated now, and a new debt budget, and a couple new operating budgets that you don't have, because they've just been done, fresh off the mint.
Just want to make sure we're still on the, because at a previous meeting with Mark, we did request, and I see you are doing it, and very happy about it, and that is that we will see the budgets the following way. One line, as you've done it now, original budget. And then whatever you do, what you do as a revision, so we can see the deltas. And then based from there, we will work forward. And that helps us a lot, because we can see exactly where it is. And
So,
I have to
yes, so
congratulate
the,
you. No, but last night,
I was just gonna do
when
that.
you presented it, you did it. Thank you.
So even today, when I was doing the updates, I've been trying to have columns that, even the small changes, like I said, the clerk's department, I mean, it's only a couple $1,000s, but I've been trying to, because otherwise you'll be confused where we're at, so I'm trying to just make these incremental notes as we go along. That's about
I'm
it.
going to open up for people on the any committee member, you know, where we have questions. I'm going to go down this way now this time, just to get clarity in their own minds as to where we're heading with this, where there may be questions. Hopefully, having had a look at last night's Board of Selectmen meeting, so we don't want to repeat that. So why don't we go down the line? Ravi, you want to shoot, or am I too fast for you? He's busy taking minutes. Well, we will pass you.
Okay.
Why don't we start there? We'll come back to you, because he's been focusing here.
I didn't see the meeting last night, so hopefully I
Shame
don't
on you.
repeat anything. But so you got 6.5% as kind of a soft target,
Correct.
and then there's a bunch of unknowns. Are we kind of skating on the edge on this? So could the unknowns blow this thing up well over 7?
Possibly, and it could. The unknowns. I'm just trying to remember all the unknowns. But yes, the little wrench was that regional number. We weren't really expecting that, so we weren't definitely not expecting it to go up. Hopefully we'll have an answer on that in the next few weeks. I have to say I can't blame Christine, because this time of year we've never really gone through the regional and K-8 numbers this early. It's a little early to do that for a lot of reasons on their side, but she's trying her best. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to add some money to the regional assessment, assuming that it's going to go up some percent above what we have now, and just to protect ourselves. But you're not wrong. We don't have the type of things this year we've had in previous years that might. Usually in previous years we've had a lot more things that might go our way, and we're a little more conservative. This year we really don't have a ton of things to go our way. So you're right. It's a little more of a roll of dice this year. So I'm the bearer of the bad news this year. Well.
Judy, go.
I watched the meeting last night, but maybe I left the room. I just wanted to confirm what a 6.5% number would be in terms of the change in the property tax. How much would the average house go up? The average tax
It
bill?
was about $600 and a little over $650, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So yeah,
If it goes up to 7%, it'd be $700.
right. It just happens to fall like that. Yeah, this year. Yeah, that's how I can remember it easy.
So I had missed the DPW meeting last week, but I know that the Board of Selectmen had requested an analysis done on the transfer station. Do you know if that's being worked on? And
Which analysis?
so for private versus what they're going to do with the transfer station in the future?
It's good news that they were doing that. Since I've said that's one of our cost areas, actually. Not this year so much, but as you know, the capital plan does have a big item in there per Karen's recommendation for some changes up there. It's quite a high dollar amount. It's not. I know it's not done yet, but I know they've done this 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, somewhere about that. So I can't imagine it's a whole lot of work to refresh it and get it done. Ironically, it's funny you bring up the transfer station. Ironically, it didn't come up last night, but the Public Works Planning Board wanted actually to be here last night, but we didn't have the room for them. They wanted to recommend to put the transfer station fees under the tax rate. So we do have an estimate, and we can actually share that with you. We've shared it with the selectmen, that they did an analysis of what cost that would be. It's really not feasible. I mean, I'm sorry. What does it cost? I can't remember, because they phased it in over 3 years. I can't remember. They had a formula for it. I will send them on. Sure.
Did they also come up with any alternative, like a usage-based system?
No. There was some debate about support, keeping support for the transfer station in the future. I mean, it's a hot topic, you know how that is. And I was a little surprised that the whole committee, and that's fine, the whole committee did support the transfer station as it is. I think the transfer station has a lot of efficiencies that could be put into it. First of all, I won't even get into it.
Okay, can we, there's a lot of nebulousness about this transfer station at this point.
Right,
But on the record, is correct, the Board of Selectmen decided to keep it going as it is,
As of now, yes.
and not to look at privatization or other means. That
Well,
was the
if
decision.
there's a study going on, they may be doing that. In fact, I didn't see that meeting either with Karen. I didn't make last week's meeting.
I didn't hear it last week. I heard it several meetings ago. So,
Oh, okay. I can certainly follow up with that and get more information on it. But
Thank you.
I do know about trying to put the rates under the tax rate, though. So,
And I just have one other question.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have updated the numbers, so I may not have the most current numbers, but do you know what you and Mark have factored into what the public safety building will return back to the town in the capital plan?
return, you mean the savings
Yeah.
from the, I know, I don't have that anywhere in the, I'm not sure how we're gonna illustrate that. But
Okay.
I do know, I'm not even gonna speak off the cuff.
Okay, that's
There
fine.
is a number out there, because I know
Okay.
and I can't remember where I saw it. There was some dialogue between Mark and someone else about that
Okay.
question. So, I'm happy to like follow up with those two issues for you.
Okay,
though.
and I can, once you republish the capital plan, I can look at the numbers
Sure,
then, too.
sure,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you. That's all I have.
Would you refresh my memory on where we stand with the cycle with the union contracts?
They're all up. They're all up, and except for the teachers, of course. Teachers are a year off. They're a year ahead, so they have 1 year left. But Mark is in negotiations now with the three. I think he's made a lot of progress on one, and may even be done with one.
In the three being?
Police, but, well, actually, there's four. I'm sorry, I always forget, and I apologize. I always forget the communications and our union. The police communications, the police officers, fire, DPW. So he's in active negotiations with all four. And the money, I think we've mentioned this, but the money or the estimated factor in those are in the budget figures that we have.
In the duration for each
3
of
years,
those? 3
yes,
years for
3
each?
years, yes.
And that's the same for the schools, 3 years?
It is, yes.
Could I just add one clarification?
Sure.
though?
You gotta wait now
Oh,
for your
I'm-
turn again.
Formal.
On this subject,
It's on this subject.
okay.
I can't say anything,
You can say
I would
go
like
ahead.
to go down the line and come back to you. How's that?
but it's real, okay.
Okay, go, if it's on the subject, go ahead.
Go
So
ahead, go
it's
for it. It's a
ahead.
quick one, I bet.
Maybe I misunderstood what you just said,
Yeah.
but the union contract increase is not actually in the operating budget for that department.
Correct, not that department. Yes, it's in the, I meant
Won't
it's in the
see it in
budget figures,
fire.
right.
Police.
Good correction. Yes.
There's,
Where is it?
Can't tell you.
What do you mean you can't tell me?
I can't tell you.
Because it's not there?
It's there.
It's there.
It's union contract negotiations.
I understand you can't tell, no, I understand you can't tell me the number,
Right.
but is it reflected somewhere in the budget?
Oh,
So
yes,
that
yes.
this
Yeah, yeah.
6.5% is a
Yep,
real
it's
number?
in that number, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's there, but it's not.
Tell him which line, tell him which line I.
No, I don't, I don't,
It's a separate line item until they get, they know.
I
what it
understand
is.
that. I just wanted to make sure it's in the 6.5%.
It is, no, it is. There is a valid reason why we do that.
I understand why it is.
Have to.
Yeah, we went through that at the previous meeting. Mark was very specific about it, and we said, it's okay. Was it Kathy?
So Chelsea just confused me on the question about the building. So you know what the building's gonna cost. We've got a pretty good idea at this point. Haven't you used that actual number in your debt amortization schedule, so you know what the debt service is gonna be for next year? I mean, you know what we're gonna borrow at this point,
Correct.
and that's what you've used.
Correct.
I
I
don't know what
think,
you mean
unless
about
I'm
money
getting
coming
confused what
back.
she's asking, what, I thought you meant like for, the facilities part of the, or the utilities part of the project. Is that
So
what you mean?
for the, so the bid came in lower.
Right,
Then-
so it's gonna cost, we agree we've got a lot more, it's gonna cost a lot less than what we got approved.
Right,
But
it's
he
not gonna
knows
meet.
that, so he's already got the actual number
Right.
built into the debt schedule, so there's
Correct.
no money coming back
Well,
anyplace.
but what you were approved to borrow is 27.6
Mhm.
million, and the bid came in at 22.
Right.
So you had $4 million.
But we haven't borrowed it yet.
Right.
He
You
says
haven't
now,
borrowed, you haven't
he's-
borrowed it yet, but do you know how much, like your bid alternates?
The
Do you know
value.
what those are gonna come in at that could bite into your contingency?
yes. We're at this point, to the point, that we are very confident that this building is gonna, we know what it's gonna cost. And it's gonna cost about $4 million less than what
Yeah,
it
that's what I thought.
we thought it was gonna cost. The bid came in a lot less, the contingency's not gonna be used, much at all. So we're pretty confident we know now what it's gonna cost, so Brian knows what it's gonna cost, because we know what it's gonna cost, and so he has forecast the debt he's gonna have to end up with. He's doing this incrementally, because, you pay the
Right.
construction guy, $1 million a month or so.
Right.
So he's financing as late as he can, then he'll have it all financed around July, I would think, and so we'll know what August?
Don't know.
Okay.
It's
Well,
but yeah, something like that,
around
yeah, something like that.
So I just don't want anybody to think we got $4 million coming back anyplace.
Oh,
We
no, no,
don't.
no, I'm sorry,
That's what I
Chelsea.
thought
I
Chelsea was
misunderstood what you were
asking
talking about.
Okay, so, but it is, the good news is, it's a lot less.
Right,
This is the
right.
first project I can remember that came in under budget, and, so that's all great, but it's still a lot of money, it's a lot of new debt, and, we've got a budget problem. Okay, so I'm Joe Public, and I come to town meeting and I say, look, guys, my Social Security went up 2.8% this year. My husband who's still working, his raise was 2.5%. Inflation is 1.9%. How on earth does this town think I can keep paying real estate taxes that increase at 3 times at 6.5%? Because once it's baked in, it's baked in. Next year, that's where we start, and we go from there. So a 6% increase is going to double taxes in 12 years, something like that, using Rule 72, right? So it just sounded like the meeting last year, they just threw out 8, 7, 6, take 7, take 6, without any real basis, because you started at almost 10, and then they had to go down from there. I just think even a 6, we all know it's unsustainable year after year after year. So at some point, we've got to understand that there's going to, at some point, have to be a reckoning here, and we're going to have to change something and cut something that's big. And it may be people, which we don't want to do, but we've got to at some point have the courage to start looking at this, and we can't do 6.5% year after year. I know we need these things, I know where it's coming from, but when everything else is not going up like that, and your income's not going up, you can't keep socking people with increases that are so much more. So that's my diatribe. I'm gonna stop. We'll see how this all ends up.
You have a
But,
question as well?
No, I actually don't have a question. Actually, I do have one. Can you just, why is Doreen Ferguson still on the rec commission salary schedule?
Who?
Oh, for
Can
her,
you
the
repeat the
back
question?
schedule.
Repeat the question,
Why
please?
is Doreen still listed as the,
As in the,
yeah,
in the back page.
just
She
because
really
they don't
shouldn't
know
be.
who the new person is yet?
Yeah, we usually issue it as a new employee. That's probably what it should say. It shouldn't say her name. No.
Okay, all right. So that's my
Yeah.
question.
Sir, or replacement? You don't have a replacement name to put in, so.
No, certainly not now, no.
So, $650 is a big number, and the answer to John Q. Public is we need to change the way we do things in town. That's the answer. It's not the answer anyone wants to hear, but that's the answer.
Well, budget crisis usually can lead to sort of thinking outside the box, which is sometimes hard to do, so
Right,
that's good.
and changes in the way that, you know, we deliver services.
Correct.
But that's not a discussion that should start from this board.
Yep.
I have more of a question to the chair here than to you. So the departments have been asked to go back and retool their budgets. We're not having them come back to us after the budget is approved by the Board of Selectmen, are we? Because I would not want to have the department head of the Youth Commission to have to spend another night here in front of us arguing a different or presenting a different budget. I assume, Mr. Peters, that we are, the presentations that they are giving us, that's the work product that we're gonna go with in making our final vote. Because otherwise, in all honesty, we're spending a lot of time duplicating the effort, and we have to come back and do it again. And if that's the way that this committee has done it in the past, so be it. I didn't know it that way, but I think there's a better way that we could do it once. Maybe I just don't understand the process. I don't want to have the department heads have to come to the selectmen twice and then have to come to this committee twice.
John, I will respond.
Okay.
In previous meetings, I explained the tightness of the process,
Yep.
and I will do it again. The issue this year is that we really are facing an issue. We have to be presented with a balanced budget from the Board of Selectmen. So we have been interviewing people so that we can get a baseline as to where we start. And so when we look now as to the reworked budgets, as Brian is doing it, he's showing us where the changes are. If it's really necessary, we will have to bring some departments back, if it's really necessary. But not all of them, if there are exceptions where we need to do it. But the whole concept is that we go through this so we can get a fundamental understanding of where the budgets start out. We can see what changes. If there's really a need, and we will discuss it, where we think it's necessary, we may bring some departments back if it's required. If we really think it's a, let me finish, if we really think it's a problem.
Yeah.
So the issue is we're sitting with such a big variation here of where we start and where we're gonna, what we're gonna work with. We will take a position independent of the Board of Selectmen. And we need to frame our minds as we work through this, because we're gonna have a real problem getting the budget back. And I'll expand it on a little bit. So the Board of Selectmen's gonna take a position, and Mark and Brian says they're not gonna be ready until the beginning of January with a reworked format of the budget. It's really a problem, because we need to wrap up by the 15th of this January approximately, 15th, 18th of January, we have to wrap up our position on the budget based on the new timeline that is there for the annual town meeting. It's going to be, we're going to be very busy. I circulated dates in January. We're going to meet one day, 2 days later, 3 days later, to see how we can wrap our arms around this as best as we can. And we just don't have an alternative. We are covering now what we can, and when we get to when we get it back again, we will review it and see where we go from there once we see the bigger picture. That is I can't see if you have a different process, you can tell me.
My only comment, and I'll just make it, and then I will stand down, is that I know personally all the department heads, and I know that when they put the budget together in the first place, they put it together with all of these town financial concerns in mind. I would rather have, for purposes of supporting or not supporting a department's budget, what the final budget is from the selectmen, what they approve, and then talk to the department head in terms of their advocacy, if they're able to operate with that budget.
Totally agree.
Okay.
Totally agree.
So I'm not sure why we're going through this first step. That's, maybe I'm just missing something, but I'm not sure why we're going through this first
John,
step.
how are you got to understand that there's a ton of work here.
I
And
understand there's
no, let me finish. If we do not do prep work here, in order to get a feel for what it is, should have made notes of, as we go through the budgets, to see where we are at, what they make notes of. We've gone through the budgets line item by line item, okay, for the time being, so that we can see where we are at, that we can get a baseline and make notes of it, keep it. It will be very difficult to bring all the departments back. If there are big changes, we'll bring them back. I don't have an issue with that.
So just let me ask one final illustration question. If, by way of illustration, the selectmen are unable to support the youth commission's budget and they slash it by they cut it by X%, and then it comes time for us to vote whether we support that budget or not, are we gonna talk again to the youth commission department head?
If we want to. If we don't want to, we'll take our position based on what you think tonight.
Okay.
Make up your mind tonight, basically, where we stand on it. If there's a real reason, once there's a difficulty, the package, when it comes back, we will look at that, and I asked Mark Purple and Brian, that we will see the original budget that you have been, that you've seen to date. Then we will see the steps that they take, and we can see where the deltas are, okay? So we can focus on the deltas instead of going through it line by line again. I don't think we're gonna have the time. So I'm trying to make this as practical as we possibly can. Most towns, I can tell you, do not, excuse me?
I was going to ask you to address some of what we learned in that retreat that we did in terms of best practices.
Well, go ahead. Why not? You can do it. You can do it.
I think the observation is that many towns don't even begin reviewing budgets until the Board of Selectmen has approved the budget and presented a balanced budget, and that really is best practice.
Yes.
And we aren't working with that here this year. And then compounding the issue is the early town meeting. So I think the decision has been made to carry on with these presentations the best we can, to make good use of their time so that on some of the less controversial budgets, we can get through it, understand it, and then be able to respond if necessary, as Adrian suggested.
So then that simply, at least in my mind, and again, maybe I'm individual in this regard, it begs the question, why are we not operating under the best practices procedure? What makes this town different in that regard?
You want to answer, Frank?
I would like,
I
I
think
thought I tried to answer it previously, John,
to
because.
put
we're
Brian
gonna-
on the spot, Brian,
Oh,
I
no,
think would be best suited to respond how the town's operated in the past, and
no,
I think there are efforts underway to,
why,
Accelerate
let
the
me just, let me
process.
ask this very simple question, Mr. Peters. Why wouldn't we wait until the selectmen are done with the budget process to begin our process?
I explained to you that if this was an easier process and we had more time after we get the budget back from the Board of Selectmen, a balanced budget presented to us, we will do it after that.
so
Totally valid point.
Okay.
Adrian, can I
Base-
ask you to reiterate when we need to finish our work
Yeah.
to make the recommendation?
We need
be
to
included with
finish
the
up
warrant?
our recommendation on January 15th, 16, 17, 18. We have to.
And the
Now,
Board
the
of
issue
Selectmen
is-
isn't meeting until,
So we are trying our best to do some baseline work
Okay.
so that we can do as best as we can in that short period, John.
I understand.
That's the only reason. If we, and I did plead with the Board of Selectmen, so did Mark Purple, that we did plead, the same as all the other towns that I know, except Westboro, when I spoke to them about it, where the meetings are not until the end of April, beginning of May. Leaves enough time to get all the ducks in a row, leaves them the time that they can present, the other towns present their budgets to the Board of Selectmen, take a position, end of this, present most of them end of December. The Board of Selectmen vote on it, they take their position around January, beginning of January, and then it leaves enough time for advisory to work through the budgets, okay? We do not have that luxury this year. We just don't.
Hopefully it's
So
one
the
year
only reason why we're doing this is I'm trying my best.
I'm not being
To-
critical
to
of
do
you. I'm
some
just
base
asking,
work.
I'm asking about the process, and it's not directed at you, Mr. Peterson.
Okay, but you're raising a very valid point.
Okay.
The issue being that there was really, having brought forward the annual town meeting leaves a lot of gaps, leaves no time for us to get work back based on the cycle that the town is following. And there's nothing wrong. Mark and Brian, what they do, their timelines are basically similar to what other towns do. All the
Why is
towns have their
January
meetings
15th our
later.
cutoff? Is that when it's got to get in the warrant article, our recommendation?
Yes,
That's why?
we asked them, and I got permission from this group at the last meeting, if you watch the video, that I will send an email to the Board of Selectmen urging them to make it, to come forward at the town meeting with a warrant article, to change the date of the town meeting, not the Saturday, we won't touch that, but to change it. The only exception I've
Well,
checked.
the question I ask is, why is January 15th our cutoff? Is that when we have to have our recommendation to
Yep.
get it published? Is
Yes.
that why?
I
Yes.
think there's a little question in there, a little bit to like Adrian said, I think he said 17, 18, it's in that area.
But that's why, that's what the date is.
Yes.
That's what date means. So, between tonight and that date, we got to remember, we're not just doing the budget. We're supposed to, our job is to opine on every single warrant article, and budget is one of those. So, when are we going to talk about the other warrant articles?
If you were at the last meeting, I asked Mark Purple about the warrant articles. We do not foresee any warrant articles except the normal ones, which are pretty administrative, and he will present it to us at the next meeting. I'm drafting
And
drafting
again,
the-
I don't mean to be a thorn on anyone's side, but if by January 15th, we're not prepared to vote on a particular budget, can it just not be noted in the warrant at town meeting?
It could, yes.
Yes, we can.
You're
Okay.
right. It
But
could
we
be
will
done.
do our best to do it if we
Right.
can. And cover as much as we can. Because to go to the town meeting with too many of it's not gonna work. So we'll just bust our butt.
And Mr. Peters, please don't think I'm being critical of you.
No,
in
no,
the
no,
way that
no,
you're
I
running the meeting.
totally-
I'm just trying to understand the process, because
but
in my very simple mind, it
No
seems like
problem.
it could be a simpler process for this board, especially when you're dealing with, critical life issues related to perhaps personnel cuts. Those are
John?
important issues.
We are on exactly the same page.
Okay.
What you are seeing is the challenge we're facing. And trying to push what we can, but you will see we haven't voted.
I see that. We haven't voted, yes.
Because we can't, because we.
There's nothing to vote on yet.
Yeah, we will vote on it in January. I sent an email to the Board of Selectmen, as we voted last time. I did send an email to the Board of Selectmen, Mark and Brian, to say that they need to move. We wanted the position taken by them last night, so that this can move forward. Now, the issue being is if we could wish it, we still want the Board of Selectmen to take a position before January. If it's possible, late in, they have a meeting on the 18th. Is it the 18th?
Yes.
They have a meeting on the 18th. Brian says they can't supply them the information then yet, right?
I doubt it. But
So
if we can,
everything.
that's great.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say
So there is a complication. We're facing a difficult budget there are major cuts they are making, and we're gonna run into a time issue. We will bust our butt and see what we can do by January 15th, and if we cannot do it, we will carry on, and we will come up with different views at the town meeting.
So one more
But,
comment about other non-money articles. I've never been to a town meeting where we didn't have a contentious one or two. So the idea that they're all administrative, I doubt, it's probably not totally correct. There's got to be some things on there that are going to cause us to need to really discuss them. So I don't know how we're going to get that done. So I don't know what's on there. I've heard rumors about some of them, but
There's no issue that if it's
There's what?
necessary,
No, I'm sorry, I haven't seen any yet, other, unusual.
you
ones,
haven't
but-
seen them? Are
I
you?
haven't seen them, but that doesn't mean they're not there,
Yeah.
or that I'm not.
we're
I
not
don't know.
aware, I will speak to
Honestly, I
that.
don't
We are, as far as Mark told me at the latest, that there's nothing contentious yet that there is, but if it comes up, we will have it. I just want to say, one of the reasons, John, this is looking at it a little bit, think about the following. we have quite a number of new members on the committee, including you. So to work through these budgets right now gives you, it's a learning curve. You can see what is there, how it, what is basically in it. Prepare yourself, because when January comes, we're going to be very busy. And I think it's a good format to use the time we have now, at least to lay a foundation for where we're going. Everybody can get familiar with it, because January is going to be very busy. And so I hope I can answer your question, your point, and I'll shut down after this. We should not be presenting. We should not be in this position where we have to do this. The town meeting needs to be later, number one. Number two, the way Mark and Brian is going about the time schedule, there's nothing wrong with it. It is basically best practices. It's the way it is. There are items, so they're doing the right thing. The time schedule from when the Board of Selectmen takes the position, same as in most other towns that are good practices, is beginning of January. And then we need time to go through the rest of the work. And we just don't have the time this year, and there needs to be a change to the town meeting. And then we will do exactly what you wish, which is the right thing to do.
We can just, let's move on.
Did I answer that? Are you, I just want to ask specifically, you've been to some of the meetings with me. Do you want to close out on that one? Okay. It's the best we can do this year, John.
I had a question for Brian.
It's a question for you, Brian. We'll be with you.
You are
just
going to
now.
get one in. Okay.
Yeah, I have. So you mentioned something about the Choate turf field.
Yes.
So did I note correctly that it's around $60,000? Is that what the number was?
I'm sorry, how much?
Was it for $60,000?
It's 60,000 FY20.
And was it?
That's not the full amount was 120. It's a design, the design amount.
So it's not a feasibility study, but it's actually a design.
Correct. Like I said, it's a relatively new
Okay.
conversation. Maybe that's part of why Recreation wanted some more time. It could be part of it. So I don't know the details. Like I said, last I knew it was near, and 3 days ago it changed to Choate. So,
Because I think as we noted last year, sometime a design implies that
yeah.
it is going forward or at
I
some point in the
got-
future. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
I've got one last question for you. Tell us what is the tax rate which would be to tax to the max this year? And if you don't know, would like you to email it to us.
The actual tax rate,
Yeah.
meaning like $16 per thousand, blah, blah, blah.
If we tax to the max this year, in other
With
words,
everything that was asked,
you know what tax to the max is, right?
I'm not sure.
yeah, I don't know if you mean what
Let's
was
answer it this
requested,
way. How much levy capacity are we going to have left with the budget before you start cutting things? We got anything left at this point?
When do we?
It was about 200,000, I
That's
think.
it?
Yeah.
So we're going to use it all up if we don't.
It's
start cutting.
pretty much gone, yeah.
Say that again.
I believe it was about 200,000. It might be a little under that, but it's been fluctuating a little bit around that. So it's basically fluctuating around the levy limit, so, because it was under it a little bit, and then it went over it a little bit.
So if this
So-
happens again next year, what are we going to have to do?
Well, you'll just pass an override, right?
Right.
We don't want to say that.
I know.
That was mentioned last night
Sorry,
by someone,
But that's what
Bonnie?
we're heading toward.
and, I think people
but
would tar and feather us before that would happen. So,
I still would like you to have a look at the levy capacity.
yes.
Tell me when we hit the ceiling and at what rate, at what tax rate that is.
That brings up a point, and I'm not going to belabor this because the library needs to get on, but I did want to mention last night that I mentioned to the selectmen, we do need to do that 10-year projection. The reason I haven't done it is for this reason, because we need to sort of get the base set before. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing it and then just keep switching it and switching it and switching it. That's pretty much what happens. So I want to have this settled a little bit with me and Mark at where our recommendations are, and then I have a good base to start building that 10 years out. That's going to be interesting, especially last night I said the 3 to 5 years will be interesting, but I just wanted to let you know we haven't forgot about that. So
Okay, but you will remember my question and
Sure.
answer it?
Sure.
I do want to, for the members who were not here, did speak to Mark at the meeting last time, where we see if it's possible coming for the town meeting, if we have the time, where there are projections of future budgets, at least 3 to 5 years, based on the debt schedule, based on debt going off, as well as assuming decent running rates for operating expenses, so that the town can see what is awaiting forward. We cannot just have the discussions which are public now, and that is that the next 2 to 3 years, at least the next 3 years, are going to be as difficult as this one. Plus, we're kicking stuff down the road. And so that we can parcel that, and that the town can see not just this year, but what they can expect the next 3 years. So it's open, based on what's been said, and we know the next 3 years are going to be as tough, if not worse. And we want to, the town needs to have transparency for it to see what this is, especially if we vote for new articles. And we will, Frank and I shared it with Mark, so just to keep it in, I actually not forcing you now, but I just want the rest of the committee to know that we're heading that way, if it's possible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Listen, can I just ask you that, I know you, Brian, I know you're a very busy man. The administrative budgets that's on the agenda for tonight,
Yes.
would you still have time to do that after the library?
Would I? The budgets after this,
Yep.
which are
On the agenda is administrative budgets. You and I,
administrative
Brian, we
budgets.
discussed it. This is all the stuff, selectmen, all the admin,
Oh,
basically
sure,
the internal
sure.
stuff. Do you, or do you want to leave it for the next meeting?
I can make a shot at it if you want. It's up to you. We can see where we are.
If
I'm
you have the
staying
time,
anyway, so-
because we just want to take the library.
Yep.
But if you are tight and you don't get sleepy, you need to get back to work, I'll leave it for the next meeting.
No, I'm staying, so
Are you sure?
we can, yes.
Okay. Thank you. All yours, Ryan, and all your partners. Please. So next on the agenda is library, and just want to know. Thank you, everybody. Boys, thank you for coming.
Hi, everybody.
Evening.
Hello.
Ryan, we distributed to everybody electronically the budgets, so they have it, so you can just shoot.
Okay.
As long as you be clear as to which line items or specifically what you talk about, just point out where you are on the papers.
Sure. So, I don't know if there's a particular place you'd like me to start. The Board of Trustees for the Southborough Library is going to meet again on December 18th. There was a lot of budget information that came out in the last week, both at a department head meeting I attended with Mark and Brian. I've had a lot of subsequent conversations with Brian since the department head meeting. You know, I think we're going to address some of the budget concerns for the town and then see what the board would like to do. So I don't know that this budget is final. I would assume we may make some changes, so.
Are you done?
I mean,
Oh.
so I don't know if we want to talk about a non-final budget. I can talk about where we were at when we calculated this, if that's what you'd prefer to do. But again, because this isn't the final number, you know what I'm saying?
No, we totally understand, but
Okay.
we've done it with the others. So
Sure,
why don't
sure.
you try to take the opportunity, because it's the only reason why, as I, listened to what John asked validly. Talk us through the main areas here and why it is what it is, because then if it gets cut, at least or if it changes, we understand, because we will see the deltas, where they are. So why don't you walk us through and tell us where are your touchy items, what's important, what you think should not change? I'm just telling you, you can
Sure.
talk to us. We are not the Board of Selectmen.
Well,
So-
I feel like I can talk to the Board of Selectmen too,
I
but,
know, but what I'm saying to you is just tell us where you're at, where are the pressure points, what needs to be done.
sure. We had two probably in-depth budget meetings on the trustees side. One of the things that I think jumps out right away is that, on the percentage side for part-time salaries, that looks like sort of a big jump. There had been a temporary staff member that we had hired at the end of last year's fiscal year. Because we had a staffing shortage. I had 2 full-time people who were out for sort of an extended period, and we were retooling one of the jobs because it had been a departmental transfer. We lost one of our senior library assistants to the accounting office, so we retooled her job as the new assistant director and young adult librarian position. So we had hired this part-time person who covered a lot of the hours. She was still working part-time, so it was about 18 or 19 a week. We invested a lot. We trained her a lot. We wanted to retain her as a part-time employee. The only problem was we didn't have hours for her in the budget because that had been decided very far before we had sort of had her in place and had trained her. So that's, you see kind of more money. That's what that's for, is to give hours to the new library associate employee. Other things that we sort of prioritized this year were we had, in order to accommodate the assistant director's inclusion, we had made a concession on our programming budget. I can tell you that we're still tabulating the results from a recent community survey, but we had over 350 users give us feedback, and a lot of what I'm reading is more programming. People want more library programs. They want it at different times. They want it for different ages. So, we do try to pursue low cost and free programming as much as possible. We always make our programs free to residents. In order to get quality program, we do have to pay people to come in to provide the services. Especially, right before I came here, I was hosting a gingerbread house making program at the library. I have lots of cute pictures. But, we paid the programmer to come in and do that, and she provided all the materials. So that's really where the cost is. The woman who provided the program didn't make a lot of money. I'll say that. In addition to that, this has been something I've worked on with the new assistant director. We don't really have a lot for professional development. Typically, we've gone and tried to request things from the personnel board. They don't have a very large budget. I'm trying to engage at least my full-time staff more in professional association memberships and maybe attending local conferences. Even with the increase there, we don't have a lot of money. So we're looking at maybe, everybody joining the Massachusetts Library Association and maybe being able to fund me or one other person to go to the MLA conference, which is in Framingham. So just for the association conference attendance, it's, a couple $100 to do that. Dues and memberships is something we really can't control. That has a lot to do with the increases from CW Mars, which is the library's local regional consortium. We're also putting a lot of our electronic resources in that line item. So we're trying to make sure if it's an anticipated cost for our membership fees or for databases, we have Ancestry, a few others, we're making sure that it's in there.
I ask, see your water budget is down. Is it because you have enough water there? No, but,
Ouch.
no. I was there and I saw the water, so, no,
I'd agree too soon. We did try. People have noted that, the water at 550 and the in-state travel at 611 were based on actual numbers we spent in the prior year's budget. So what we did was we made a reduction in water and we increased the in-state travel, kind of based on what we had spent in the year prior, assuming we do similar activities and mileage reimbursements. But water
I will
is
open up
something.
now for but can you, I mean, looking at the chaos and the mess, I mean, what you have there, how is it affecting the library? Is it affecting cost? I mean, operationally, when do you think you will be back up? Just give us a bit of a scope while you're at it.
Sure. I mean, half of our building is not really publicly accessible right now. So I could say that there's no impact to operations, but that wouldn't be true. I would really like my children's librarian to have a children's library downstairs. So we want downstairs completely reopened for the meeting space as well, but the focus has been on the children's space in particular. We'd like to get that up and running as soon as possible. We're looking at a rough time frame of somewhere in late January, early February for a full reopening, which is, I I agree. So we haven't really, it hasn't really affected programming. I had said this to the selectmen when I went before them. A couple months ago. The only thing we really had to cancel were Lego programs because the Legos were a physical item that was affected by the flood. So we've had a lot of very nice, accommodating residents who have offered to donate us Legos to continue the programs. The only problem is we don't have storage. I would say storage and the staff being on top of each other has been probably the biggest issue. We're one big happy library family over there. We're amazingly all getting along, and we all still love working with each other. Probably the biggest operational effect has been, we have part-time supplemental staff who assist Kim downstairs. And when full-time staff members are working downstairs and we need to have coverage upstairs, we have part-timers cover there as well. The library pages, who are sort of, a little less than half the staff, we've had to cut their hours in half. So we just don't have a place for them to work without a downstairs. So that's been the most upsetting part of a really upsetting situation for me, is not having our staff be able to come in and work their regular schedules.
I think, and Ryan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the gating factor now for our reopening is the furniture. Furniture is on order, but the existing furniture was destroyed by the flood, and that's going to be the factor that pushes the reopening out until January.
Just state your name and position just for the record. I know, but.
Richard Wallace, Chair of the Trustees, 18 Clifford Street.
Yeah, Chair of the Trustees. Okay, just one for the record. I'll open it up. We start down that side. John?
Richard and Ryan, I think you've put together an exceptionally conservative budget. It looks to me it's up $20,000 from last year. Correct?
Yeah.
And you talked about the part-time as being a large increase, but in the overall budget, it's a $9,000 increase.
That's correct. So the percentage looks high,
Right.
but the actual amount of money is very low.
So, in case I don't have a chance to ask you again, if you have to cut this budget, where do you cut it?
So I'd like to preserve as much of the salaries line
Right.
as possible. When we did have the budget deliberations on the trustees' side, there was a concern that we wouldn't lower anybody's hours. I do have 2 of our library pages are high school students, and they're graduating. So in the reworked salary lines, we're not planning to replace them. What I'd like to do is work with our existing staff. We're still going to have 7 7 to 8 pages on payroll that we can try to work with and fill open hours, but the full-time staff will have to pick up.
So it impacts service, though, to the community.
Yeah. So really, we are a service organization, and I have staff who provide programs. So that's why Kim is such an essential part of the library. We wouldn't be doing morning story times, 3 or 4 times a week if Kim isn't there and doesn't have hours. And if Kim is doing a program, I need part-time staff who can help when people are checking out books and assisting residents. So that's...
Well, yeah,
Thank you.
I thank you for putting together this budget.
We'll just
Like I
move
said,
up.
I think it's a very conservative budget.
Okay. Next. Next.
Thank you. I just have a general question. So with the library, can you kind of just touch on kind of what the long-term plan is and kind of what the risk mitigation is so that this doesn't happen again and put you out again?
Yeah, so I'm working very closely with John Parent. I feel like he's become my best friend in town. Whether we want to work together or not, it's been a working relationship of necessity. We have to check in daily, usually 2 or 3 times a day. I can't say enough nice things about him. He has really prioritized the library in addition to all of the other things that he is responsible for and he has to do. We are also, I was at CPC for almost 2 hours last night. We had a pending facade restoration assessment project, which had been approved at town meeting. We got the report this week. Our roof, this is the top part of the library. We've been so focused on the lower part, is not in great shape, is what we learned from the assessment report. So we're working with our operating project manager, but that also has some long-term implications for our building as well. John is hoping to, he's exploring a bunch of different potential solutions. I mean, I don't want to use the word fix or solution here. The physical location of the library makes water a problem. I don't know that it's ever going to not fully be a problem for us. We need to be very mindful of it. The trustees recently finished my evaluation, and one of the things I'm being tasked with is almost like a disaster plan, what to do in case this happens again, and what are the steps. I can honestly say I've learned a lot as part of this process. I don't want to start using half-full metaphors because that involves water. So, I'm trying to make the best of this situation. I think the staff has tried to make the best of this situation too. We're seeing a lot of the physical infrastructure changes at the library. We could potentially flood tomorrow. That's the reality of the situation we're in. John is hoping to present options where we could divert water away from the building. And I think I know he addressed you guys last week. He'll be before you again. And I'm happy to come with him. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I think the question, did you mean long-term?
Yes, but it sounds like that's probably more for John from
Okay, let's
last
leave
week,
that for later.
so
Okay,
I did watch the tape, I just.
thank you. Thank you.
There is a state construction program where we have to do planning and design for either a renovated or new facility. That is something that the board and I have been talking since I was hired. So a grant cycle has not opened up for planning and design since I've been the library director. I think it's something that Richard would agree is a priority for the board that we need to pursue. And we have a very good reason to pursue that money now.
Thank you. Richard, you want to say a word to that?
The Main Street reconstruction project will start next spring, I believe. There are some specific drainage amendments that will be made as part of that project that will help the situation. We have drains at the lowest part of the library parking lot that don't drain anywhere. So that's going to be repaired and fixed with when the Main Street reconstruction project is done. So
Thank
that's
you,
a
Richard.
specific
Thank you.
change.
So those are the drains to nowhere?
Drains to nowhere, yes. Yeah. Well,
We
into
we also found a
Into the
well
library.
line, a non-functional well line. There used to be a well on the library's property, I learned recently, and there was piping that went into our meeting room that led directly to the ground. So groundwater came in, but they had built bookshelves over the wall, so we had never seen it. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of good things that's happening because this happened, if that makes sense. We've always gotten a little bit of water sometimes in that room, and we never knew where it came from. Well, now we do. So,
Thank you, Ryan. I'm gonna
So,
kind of move on.
yeah, I was heading towards saying, ultimately, the solution is another building. And we've known that for a long time. And I know the town will probably go crazy talking about another building, but there must be a way of making this happen when the grant cycle opens or somehow. And we've learned a lot. The other thing I wanted to say is that, given the crisis, it's been very pleasant going into the library. I mean, you guys have rolled with it. The books are there, which is what I frequent. And it's people are happy. It's really been remarkable that you've been able to manage that well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, not about water at all. It's more about the overall vision of the library, of a library. What is the library? What's it going to be 10 years from now? And it kind of ties into your question or your comment about future buildings and that kind of stuff. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's the classic library is kind of disappearing, and you're doing more programming now, and it's almost like a quasi-rec department a little bit. So what's kind of the vision of what the library becomes? Because I'm assuming the classic library is going to kind of evolve greatly over the next whatever.
You want to open a long discussion on that?
No, I just didn't know if they had anything.
I mean, I can speak to that succinctly, and you know what? I think we're looking at the construction program as a long-term project, and the state will pay for up to half of the building. So that kind of helps to address, I think, some of the financial concern. There's no other state construction program that's quite like what the MBLC offers through the library construction program. We are doing a new iteration of strategic planning. That's why we just completed our community survey. So part of what the library is what the community wants it to be. I'm going to form in January a strategic planning committee, and there's going to be different stakeholders. There's going to be trustee representation, hopefully advisory representation. We're going to be asking questions. We're going to be doing focus groups. We're going to look at our mission statement that we established in 2015 and see if it needs any revision. I will say that a lot of people say, the modern image of a library is disappearing. People aren't taking out books, aren't taking out movies. That's really not, that's not our library in Southborough. We have over 6,700 users who have been active in the last 2 years. That's a pretty staggering number for a community our size. That's almost 2/3, so.
So to put it in a nutshell, there will be planning done.
Yes, and I mean, we
you.
want to continue looking at the space, but also materials and books and movies. People like that. We want to continue providing that.
We'll address that for you. Robbie?
Yeah, just one question. I hate to have your staff have access to even less space than they actually have right now, but because of the potential for future damage in the basement level, whether or not the Main Street project fixes various drainage problems, one possibility might be to look at compact shelving on the upper level. So that might free up some space and actually move the children's resources upstairs. And I'm just throwing that idea out there, and maybe you've already considered it.
Yeah, you'll see differences in the furniture that's going in downstairs. Some of the stuff will be built-in shelving units, but not most of it. A lot of it's going to be modular on casters, and the idea is that if anything ever happened like this again, we'd be able to relocate furniture a lot easier.
Okay, well, I was actually referring to the upper level. If you were putting in compact shelving in the upper level, you might actually just move the children's library upstairs. potentially. And that's just an idea. And you don't need to respond to that if you don't want to.
That, it's definitely something we can address in strategic planning. I mean, that's an idea.
You obviously have somebody from the advisory that would be interested. He's already volunteered. Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with the challenges you're facing.
Thank you for your time.
Brian, you want to come back on the agenda, please, for, in actual fact, as scheduled, just to just give us some highlights on the what I call the administrative budgets, but we can go through them. You know which ones they are, right?
I hope so. Not sure, but we can run through them.
Okay?
I don't have them in front of me, so I
So
apologize.
I can call them if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just reflect to us on the budget for the Board of Selectmen.
Selectmen? Okay. And actually, I would assume the finance and the legal's probably the administrative too. Do you have legal on there? That must be on your list? Yes, okay. So, I'll actually kind of talk in general about all those. The selectmen, the 3 finance departments, the audit, I guess, might be considered one too, and the legal. There's no new hours, obviously, in any of these. Actually, it's just cost of living, which is just between contracted. There's Mark, Heidi, I should say, the town accountant, the town manager, myself are contracted employees, and the rest of the staff is all SAP. So it's all guided by the personnel board, their increases. So all these, I'm not actually aware of anything that happened in these departments except for the town accountant had a slight regrade this year. So you can see her budget's up, I think, 6% or whatever. That's why that amount is her salary in there, the difference. There's no change of hours though or anything. Town council and special legal, again, 95 and 55. These go back probably, I want to say now, 6 to 7 years. Town council hasn't changed his rate, I think, since that time. And it had been quite a while since that increase too. So he's been, whatever else you might think, the town council's been great with his rate. He gives us a pretty good rate, and it's changed very, very infrequently. So even this year with the union contracts, that's usually when we use the special legal counsel. That's labor counsel for the most part. Occasionally we have other special counsel for maybe real estate type transactions or other specialized transactions that fall under that department. This is where you'd see maybe the year, well, I shouldn't say that with the issues that have been happening the last few years. We've had special counsel for some various issues, but the union year is really where you may see more of it used, because we do, the town administrator is great at setting up the union negotiations, but at the end, we do have to have them reviewed by labor counsel. And certain issues within the union contracts require labor counsel too, as well as issues during the year that may happen with the town side with employees. Hopefully those are rare, and they are, but that's sort of what we use that budget for. So it really is standard budgets. I can say with the budgets that'll be coming forward, again, town council, I don't think will change at all. I don't think, I have a feeling we probably won't touch those. You'll probably see those amounts come as final proposals. The other ones, you're probably gonna see some reductions in, and I won't get into those yet, obviously. You'll see them when they come before you, but they'll be lower than they are now.
There's a hidden agenda behind asking you to talk about it, because in the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, we looked at departments with changes, Didn't see much in this area. I'm just saying.
Right, no, there's no changes. I'm just trying to think with all the open positions and everything at the moment. It's none of these, well, it is these departments, actually. There's a position, shared position in the assessor's office with the Board of Health that's now just, obviously, an employee is going down to the water department. So Paul, the town assessor's budget may actually change. Another totally new thing just happened. So you may have to see a recalculation on the salaries there. I would imagine, I would think that if anything, it'll probably go down. So, yeah, again, when you see these budgets, again, in January, well, actually, hopefully in 2 weeks, I anticipate you'll see them lower. So that's a good thing.
Say again about 2 weeks?
No, hopefully you see these in 2 weeks, our version of the 6.5% budgets, and I think you'll see these budgets lower, with the exception of the legal budgets.
At last night's Board of Select meeting, there was not unanimity, and they didn't really take a position on the 6 to 7. Some people were at 7, some were at 6 to 7, some were at 6 max. So I'm just asking you, and I want to put it in public, and that is that there was not clear guidance from the Board of Selectmen. So based on what was said, and we can go through the names, but I mean, and I want to be specific, I mean, because what have an issue, and I think we should just know that they didn't really take a position on 6.5.
No, they didn't,
so-
you're right, it was a range of 6 to 7, I think was the, Selectman Faniff, I think was, Selectwoman Faniff, Selectperson Faniff was 6, yes. And the rest were sort of between 6 and 7.
Brian
so-
Schifrin was at 7. Bonnie was at 6. The rest of the people were between 6 and 7, and one didn't make a commitment, as far as I can remember. So if you're going to work on the 6.5, we are still going to await the final position, because they did not take, I mean, so we'll see where we get to. So you're going to do something in 2 weeks' time.
Correct.
And even if we get that, it's not a figure that is not a balanced budget presented to us, because the Board of Selectmen will still have to take a position.
Yes, certainly.
6.5
They'll
may
have to
change.
take a position, absolutely. Absolutely. And they may end up shifting some funds around. And very likely, actually, that could happen. So- Nothing in stabilization, no. Yes.
So Brian, when you do the markup again, just include, so that we can see on the 6.5, I know you will, but again, the markup,
Sure.
if you guys make changes, but include all the budget items.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I think we're not going to dig any further into that. Actually, I'd Mark to talk to that, but if anybody else has, I think we earlier asked you questions about the budget process in general. I think I don't have anything more on this topic right now. Anybody else? Otherwise, we pass on.
Next meeting is next Wednesday, Adrian?
Yep,
Is it-
exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to, okay. All right, thank you.
The meeting is next Wednesday. The question that I have for you, I tried to get all of you today, is what makes sense to have on there. I do have recreation because basically they've made their presentation to the Board of Selectmen earlier. Basically what they gave you is their right. So we will have recreation here next week to take a position on, to at least tell us where they're coming from.
I think
and
that
will
makes
consult
sense,
with
and
you
just an update from us again, like this, similar to this, probably makes sense. I can't really see anyone else that you want to, unless your board wants to see anyone else. I really don't see a sense in it at this point.
So, again, maybe I missed it. Are we not meeting next week then?
No, I think Mr. Peterson was saying recreation, but because they missed tonight.
Oh, okay.
But that's it. I don't really see any
I
point
wanted
in
to see
anything
how
else.
tonight is going, and but tentatively,
And just a quick update from
tentatively-
Mark and myself. That's it.
Tentatively scheduled recreation. If there were, and also personnel. And what I do want to schedule, John, especially after your questions tonight, I actually have it on that we have a general discussion on the budget and how we're going to handle it going forward for the next meeting. And have a discussion amongst us so that everybody can get on the same page as how we proceed. And put that on next week. Very important that we can organize ourselves for January and we're all on the same page how we're going to handle it. And we can all have our input next meeting.
And our next meeting is Tuesday, right?
Next meeting is Tuesday, December 11th.
Okay, thanks.
December 11th. I did circulate the dates for January. I will do that again. Okay, if we go back to approval of minutes, Ravi is still getting into the saddle. We haven't got minutes for the last meeting, am I right?
That's right, I apologize for the delay. I'll have both of these ready for next time. This
Okay.
one's the last.
So we'll pass on that one. On standing projects, I did circulate what we got from Mr. Malinovsky from the Public Safety Building. I think everybody has that. Unless there's anything anybody wants to report, I'll move off there. I'll move on to the chair report. As far as we actually now discussed previously the cycle that we are facing with the Board of Selectmen budget only coming through in January. And that time is of the essence. We covered that in substance. I was going to report on it now, but we'll pass on that. The one thing that I think we would do is to make sure, and we can discuss it further at the next meeting, but everybody can think about it, is how we're going to handle going to, with our recommendation to the town meeting, to make sure that there's total transparency to the town as to where this comes from and where it's going, not just this year, but next year too. Total transparency as to what is being kicked down what we are leaving for later, especially as far as capital and facilities are concerned. And apart from that, I don't have much to say. I think we covered many points tonight. I think we'll just try to see where we can get. I asked Frank as well that at the next meeting we talk about the best practices, how we do it this year, how we should do it in the future, and also talk about how we got into the position where we are today, because the reason why we're in this position is because of things that were done in the past. I mean, we're not facing this situation today because of something that happened today. This is because of what happened in the past, and how we prevent having to face this again because we are advisory, and de facto we're also the finance committee, to make sure that this does not happen again. And we can discuss that at the next meeting. Based on that, it is very important, and I will raise the subject because I took it off the agenda for tonight. But the model that Kathy, that you used at the special town meeting for the public safety building and where we're going to be in the future, we requested that that be available. And you referred to that as well at the meeting in July. And we requested that you actually said that you would share it with the committee. And we're still awaiting that.
So what I said to you, I think on the email this week is, you're done along on an agenda at 9:45 with 15 minutes. It really should be a special meeting where everybody's had a chance to look at it ahead of time and look at it, because I tell you, we have a huge problem going forward, and nothing's changed. This is what's changed in 2 years, I think.
Please put the mic on.
Sorry. When we went in front of the town 2 years ago, the same year that we approved building the new building,
Kathy, I'm going to interrupt you. I will share it with I did send back to you an email where you committed in writing, way back.
Adrian, can you let me finish what I'm trying
No,
to say here?
I just want us to talk about.
You want to know where the 30-year model is? I'm trying to tell you, okay? So
but
I'll answer your question.
No, let me be specific first, then you can, I want specific, and we need to decide whether we go there or not. In an email committed you that you would share the model with us. And you have not shared the model with us. I had it on the agenda for 7 meetings. And there was enough time initially. And if you were to bring it forward, we could distribute, everybody can look at it, and we'll have the discussion subsequently. The issue being is that no response from you, no email, not saying you're doing it or not doing it. It's a critical piece of information because the town voted on the public safety building based on a presentation that said we have no problem doing this. We are now facing, and that's part of it, I'm not saying that's all of it, but people are asking, and I'm just saying to you, the question is, what has changed? And it's not an issue, but if we can see the model and we can see where we're coming from, what has changed that you had, because Brian has a model. He's doing a 10-year model, which is good. But we would like to, and the reason why I'm saying this is you said you would do it, and nothing has come forward. And so I don't want to go back to what happened at the town meeting. All we want to see is that's all on record. It's on videotape, what you said, and I don't have an issue with it.
I'm
All
happy
we're
to
asking
respond,
for
but I'm
is
going
the
to
model.
leave in about 2 minutes, okay? Because I'm not going to sit here and be talked to like this. I'm trying to explain to you why the model needed to be changed. This committee got in front of town 2 years ago when the Public Buildings Study Committee presented the new building to the town, the cost, it got approved. We told the town, this is fine, it's all going to fit, we've done the study, we can do that, we can do a new library, we can do some type of community rec center. That's what we told the town. What's happened in 2 years is something that has drastically changed that. And it's not clear exactly what all has happened. I'm still trying to tinker with this thing, and I've got a very nice model to show you, and so I'm happy to do it, but I can't do it at 9:45 in 15 minutes, and that's where you had it on the agenda. Plus, you need to ask me, Kathy, are you going to be able to come to this meeting and be able to do this? It really is a separate meeting where this is where our focus is and not when we're tired at this time of night, and I'm happy to do it. But what has changed, and just so everyone understands, is we did a model assuming that the year-over-year operating expense increases was going to be about 3%. We assumed that the 1/3 of the revenue that comes in from non-tax real estate taxes, the levy, was going to grow as fast as the levy was going to grow. That's not what's happening. It's not growing at all, so that 1/3 is being borne completely by the levy. So this 9% they started out with is not going to change anytime soon. I don't know if you caught what I said. We're looking at an override next year. This town doesn't like overrides. We may not get an override approved. The last time we did it, it failed. So it is a problem. So I'm very happy to, now that I've got a situation under control in my personal life, at least almost under control, I'm happy to come to the meeting and ahead of time, show it to everyone, put it on Shutterfly so everybody can see it, and go through it. But I don't appreciate being chastised like this, as hard as I work on this. It has taken a long time. I still think this committee's job is to go to the town administrator and board of selectmen and say, we would like to see a year-over-year 4% increase in the budget and show us how we get there, instead of just continually responding like we are doing right now to what they're doing and just kind of parroting what they're doing and adding no value to what's going on. But that's my opinion. But I'm happy to share this model, show you what the problem is, and show that we've really got to start, somebody's got to start taking a hard position and start looking at things that we really can cut permanently. We're a town of fixed cost, and we just continue to increase. So we've got to find a way, we've got to find a process that's going to look at things that are hard to change. For example, we don't like to reduce headcount. We know what happened a couple years ago when we tried to do one person. There are places in this town where we probably can reduce the headcount, but we don't do things like that. We just continue to focus on this 1 year at a time, keep pushing things, just like you said, pushing things down the road, defer, and it's come home to roost right now. There's no room for new, they're talking about the new library, there's no room for a new library right now.
Okay, but that's fine. There are two aspects to this. One is to distribute to us, as you promised, the model, just the essence of what was presented, the basis of what the presentation 2 years ago, because we now sit with, the town needs to have transparency, at least to know, where were we and what has changed. So firstly,
I don't like any sort of,
John.
no, wait. There seems to be an intimation that there's some nefarious reason as to why it hasn't been distributed. I think that premise is unsupported.
John, I take exception to that. I did not say that. All I said is I will distribute an email. I will not, that is not fair. I will distribute the email based on the fact that it would be shared with us. And I will ask the vice chair to comment on it as well. We are not asking for anything else. There's no insinuation. You are putting words in. No.
Well, it was pretty clear.
All we want to see is what was the basis of what was presented 2 years ago and where we go from there. What has changed. And I will speak. Frank, you want to speak to this, please?
Yeah, I don't know how much I have to add here. I think distributing the model shouldn't be dependent on it being on the agenda with a slot. There's a model, there are assumptions. There was an assertion made on behalf of advisory. I think it would be helpful to see what the assumptions were. I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, but I think it helps us understand what those assumptions were, where we're at now, and whether or not we wish to rely on this model or transition over to the model that Brian's been working. If you want to. I don't know how much more there's to add to that. I don't think there's been any ill intent, anything nefarious. I just think it would be helpful to have that model.
I would close it out there. If we get it, we get it. If we don't, I've taken it off the agenda. It was just another request for it, but I could do nothing more than that. As far as going forward is concerned, I think Mark and Brian can speak to a 10-year model that they are doing. There's a 30-year model for debt, and it should be sufficient for us to work with. I don't think we need another model, unless somebody can come up with a better model. All the towns do work like this. Brian and Mark knows how to do this. We can look at their model as well, and it will be available to us. They do a 30-year debt model. We've already seen it. There's a 10-year forecast that they've done. We've asked them to do more, and I think we can work with that. But if that's not sufficient, then we can go back to another model.
Where is the 10-year model, or 10-year forecast that they've done?
Well, we have, if you look back at what's distributed earlier, you haven't been here for 7 meetings, so, and I'm not trying to be funny, it's not the issue. I can ask, Brian, could you do that again for us, please? And, but they are very busy right now, so we will do the model when they have time, we can distribute it again.
So your 10-year model's done, Brian? That's what, you've got a 10-year model done?
I have a model, it's aged though.
Okay, all right.
It was done I would say it was up to date to about 6, 7, 8 months ago, right? Yeah. Yep. I think I spent, we do a lot of models. I don't think I can speak to it, not that I'm an expert at it, but did go through it with Brian and Mark, I would say months ago, so that we can have a proper model that we can work with, that is that can be sufficient, that we can understand, and we can work with, including debt, as well as a forecast that expenses in there. And we will continue working with them. I asked Frank also to help in that regard, and anybody else that wants to will work on it. That's as far as my report is concerned. And please, Ravi, please comment.
So, just as a general comment, any documents, it would be most useful to have them as much in advance as possible. So if Brian's model, or the so-called 10-year model, or this other financial model that we've been referring to is distributed as soon as possible, I think that would benefit me personally, regardless of when we actually, sit down and discuss it.
Public comment? Come in. I'm not gonna answer this one.
Good evening, Dorianne Jasinski, 33 Presidential Drive in Southborough, obviously. We're looking at these budgets and we're looking at the salary increases. So when Youth and Family Services came in tonight, they wanted to take a part-time person and make them a full-time person. And the salary was an increase to, I think the number they gave us was $53,000. That is not the total cost of that employee. When you bring someone who has no benefits and you bring them into a position for full-time, you're adding probably, Brian, correct me, between $20,000 and $25,000 on top of that salary for their benefits. We're very generous with our benefits in this town, but that piece is never taken into consideration, and I think that should be part of the process at this point. I'm looking at it differently from personnel now than I did on advisory, but we leave that part out of the budgets when we're looking at salaries, and that's a huge mistake. So just as a suggestion, maybe for next year, I think that we need to start including that total cost for an employee, not just the salary. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. I would, yes, absolutely, go ahead.
Brian, can I ask you to speak to that? Are the benefits included in the budget that you have worked with them on, or is that a fair observation that Dorianne just made?
No, she is correct.
Yep.
Okay, so I understand that there's a benefit burden that goes with a full-time employee. But am I hearing correctly that the budget that was presented tonight does not include the benefits that go with?
Well, it's really, since it's yes and no, I actually have to go back and look for it to see if the particular.
So can I ask the question in two
Answer
parts?
from over there.
My takeaway is that it was not included in the Youth and Family Services budget. Is it included someplace else in the budget?
Right, in the benefits budget, under the large, I say large, the $6 million
Okay.
piece with the health insurance.
So the
budget.
observation, if you will, that's being made is that for a more complete discussion, we need to be aware of the benefits that probably go not just with the new full-time position, but with all the full-time positions, or whomever's receiving benefits.
Correct. Usually the department heads, when they present it, will only present their budget cost, because that's what they see, that's what's in front of them. Obviously, that's what they budget. A new officer costs $50,000 a year to start. They won't say it costs $76,000 a year to start with the benefits. We do have to be caught. It's a valid point. I mean, it's part of the reason we put that policy in place with the selectmen to not have, or to discourage part-time people between, especially 20 and 30 hours, because we laid out the graph that showed the amount you're paying the person in benefits is actually almost outweighing at that point the amount you're paying. It's kind of a bizarre sort of illustration. So we really discourage that. But it's a valid point to keep in mind that these positions aren't just $30,000 or $50,000.
Brian, is this correct? So when we look at the budgets of the departments, the salaries are in there.
Yes.
But you, at the same time, allocate the benefits to your line item, which is benefits for your total benefits line, do you,
Correct.
in the budget?
Correct, well, also all the health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance,
For,
pension, et cetera, is in that benefits
it
budget.
goes into that line, and you can't really
Depending
do
where it
much
is.
about that.
Including the projected new people,
That's the
Correct.
question.
right?
Yes.
But, I agree, Dorian is right, you should look at the fully loaded cost, payroll taxes, everything, but
Correct.
we've never done it that way. But in Youth and Family Services case, what they tried real hard to avoid the additional costs. If you look what they're trying to do over the 4 years, they added 2 new part-time admin people, less than 19 hours each, for that reason, to not have to include those. The person who's increasing hours is already getting their health insurance. I don't think it's going to cost anything for that. So, it's not always going to be a increase. It depends on the specific hours that are being added, et cetera. They may already be full-time.
Correct,
Right.
if they work it under the 20 hours, then that doesn't matter anyways, but if
But
it,
just to be clear, when you see someone asking for a new person that's going to need benefits, you're going to pick an additional amount up in your line for benefits until it gets ratcheted back down.
correct, and the reverse is true also. If we pull it back down to under 20, we'll pull that off the benefits budget, which is why I actually had to play with the benefits budget a little bit in those scenarios the selectmen asked for, because especially in the lower tax increases, we actually had to pull, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but we had to pull some staff out, eliminate positions. So I had to adjust the benefits budget down too. You're right, it's a linked thing.
Thank you, Brian.
But again, valid point.
Just before we close, again, I think it would be good if everybody agrees that we have a meeting next week. Secondly, that we open the discussion to better practices. We have to make a plan to do things better going forward. And I can share quite a bit of that. I can tell you, and I would like to tell you, I have met with, I have talked to other towns around us, and we've had Ellen Tosti here. I've spoken to people who really are doing things well. I can have that feedback. Frank has done work in this regard, at least on our side, as to how can we work better in the future, because this is not a good situation we are in. And I have been working very hard on that with the help, and Frank has also done a lot of work. And so at the next meeting, that we talk about this, because some of this could be put in perspective at the town meeting, actually, because it's going to be a tough town meeting. I don't know whether everybody saw what happened at the Board of Selectmen meeting last night. The town meeting is going to be tough. It's my projection. And why are we looking at such a percentage in increase? How did this come about? And what the hell are we going to do about it? And I think it would be good if we are prepared and we meet next week, apart from what else could be on the agenda, put time aside for this, where all of us can talk about it and share information and see where we go from there. That's closing out on my side.
Could I just make one brief comment, just so that everyone understands what my earlier comments were? My earlier comments were not a criticism on the Board of Selectmen's practices in the budget process. My criticism, to the extent you want to quantify or qualify it as a criticism, is that I'd like to do this once. I'd like to review the budgets once after they've been approved by the Board of Selectmen. That's what my criticism was. It seems like we're doing multiple steps, and maybe we could do it in one step.
John, you're absolutely right. So would we
And again,
like.
it's not a criticism on the way that you run the meeting.
Yeah, but I want to make sure you understand. I share it totally.
Right.
I share it totally. We're in an emergency mode here. We're not going to, we are in the emergency room. So we're trying to do what we can. And the reason why I'm emphasizing again, I would like everybody to be at the meeting next week, because so that we can sort out and see where we're going to go. Because I think these questions will come up at the town meeting, and I think we should be prepared as to how, because it's a fiscal problem. This is a fiscal problem. And it does rest on the Finance Committee's shoulders. And we will make
It's a structural problem as well, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a structural problem. It boils down at the end of the day to a fiscal issue, which is what we're facing. And that we discuss it next time, to your point, and we all kind of get some input and some light in this where we can. Thank you. Everybody okay? Then I move that we adjourn. Second. All in favor? Thank you very much.